All right, you can turn in your Bibles to Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 23. It'll also be up on the screen. We continue to make our way through the book of Ecclesiastes, and if we've been following along with what I'll just call a confused, wise skeptic who stumbles upon the truth every once in a while and is often very frustrated. He looks at life under the sun and he can't find any meaning. Now, when something goes wrong, which happens a lot in my life, the first question that every one of us asks is what? Why? Why? A diagnosis comes back, and before anything else, you want to know why. A friendship ends without warning, and you replay every conversation in your head before the moment turned, and you're like, what happened there? Or a good person loses his job to a person that cuts corners, and we need an explanation. Why did this happen? Or fathers, you've got a kid, and you're just like, what is the right technique for this kid? I'll literally read any book, and then you realize there is no technique. We demand an explanation. As if the pain would be more bearable if someone could just show us the logic behind our pain and our question. We often think, if I just had more information, we could understand. Like, we don't like to admit the three magic words, I don't know. Trust me, ask me anything, those words come out of my mouth quite a bit. We don't know the answer to a lot of our hardest questions. Now, Kohelet, who's speaking in most of this book, had every resource a person would want. He has wealth, he has wisdom, he has time, he has position, he's used it all. And by the end of the search in the passage this morning, he says something that probably would frighten all of us to say out loud, I don't know. I looked, I could not find out. So if you've ever needed an explanation that never came, I think you're going to recognize yourself in this man. I think by the end of the passage, you're going to find out exactly where his honesty leads him, even if you don't see it yourself. So I'm going to go through four walls that he runs up against. The first one is, life is too deep to find. This is verse 23 through 29. Look down at verse 23. All this I tested by wisdom and said, I am determined to be wise, but this was beyond me. That's not a great start, is it? This is the most resourced, the most intelligent, the most relentless seeker in the ancient world that the world could ever produce. And he tells us very plainly at the beginning what he's going to do. I turn my mind to understand, to investigate, to search out wisdom and the scheme of things. He wants to make sense of it, don't you all? And before he even tells us what he finds, he tells us the conclusion in verse 24. Whatever exists is far off and most profound. Who can discover it? It's almost like he already knows what's going to happen here, but he decides to run the test anyway. Look at verse 26 and 28. So he goes through looking for the scheme of things and for some pattern of wise and foolishness, of righteous and who is not. And what does he find? This is a surprise. Something that's more bitter than death, a woman who is a snare, whose heart is a trap, whose hands are chains. He says he searches, and he can't find one upright woman among 1,000. He does find one upright man, and I'm like, probably thought it was him. Now, how does that strike you? Kohelet, come on, man. Some people have puzzled over these verses. Some commentators have cheered it on and said, yeah, women are the problem on Father's Day. Women are the problem. Some of you are guessing, like, what have I walked into? Some commentators say Kohelet's talking about one kind of woman. Like, this is the wicked woman versus the noble woman, which is how Proverbs talks about the subject. But Kohelet isn't talking about one woman. Look at verse 28. He could not find one good woman among all of them. Yeah. This is not God's verdict on women. Whose verdict is this? Kohelet's. This is, in the book of Job, Job records his friends, or whoever's writing Job records his friends, and they all sound wise. And are they right? No, they're wrong. And God explicitly says so at the end. Ecclesiastes, remember, does something similar. The book is introduced. Kohelet is let loose on us, and at the end of the book, the frame narrator comes back and says, listen, not everything you hear here is great. What has Kohelet done? He's found, I think, my take is he's found someone to blame. That is, he's exhausted his search, a search that starts, and he can't reach to the bottom of things. And so he stops asking what is true, and he starts asking who is responsible. I'm going to pick the closest person at hand, who's the easiest to indict, and they become the answer, whether they deserve it or not. I mean, we would rather have a guilty party than an unanswered question, right? So verse 29, he corrects himself. This only have I found. God created mankind upright, but they have gone in search of their many schemes. That's Genesis 1 through 3. God made humanity upright. All have gone unto their own schemes. God's commands are not meant to hurt us. They are not meant to kill our joy. They are meant for our flourishing and good. That means all sin is dumb. Very theologically astute term there. Sin makes you stupid. Well, I mean, you throw away your family for 15 minutes of pleasure. You flirt with someone who is married. You scroll through websites that bring death to your relationships. You gamble away your family's security. You keep drinking and you tell yourself it's just moderation while your family absorbs the cost. You attack people and tear them down. You let other people abuse you and take advantage of you, and then you blame yourself. You enrich yourself on the back of others. You backstab your friends at school or your siblings. And why can't you even listen to the person who's sitting across from you? What is that? Sin is what? Temporary insanity. Forgetting God, forgetting your place, forgetting the consequences. You say, I won't get caught. Does anyone remember a time? Everyone want to look?
Darren, it's not.
Oh, yeah, it's okay. Does anyone remember a time in your life when you got caught? What happens? You jump. You run. You hide in shame. I remember years ago reading a study about how to cut down on cheating in tests in school. Do you know what they did? They set up mirrors around the classroom so the students could see themselves cheating. They didn't like it. But before God, you don't get caught. There's no caught with God. He just knows. That's why sin is always temporary insanity. Maybe you've had those moments where you've come to your senses and you say out loud, what? What was I thinking? Why was I scheming in that way? Sin in the end is always against God. Yes, it injures people. Yes, it breaks community. Yes, it vandalizes your soul. But ultimately, sin is defiance against a God who loves you and made you and wants to rule you for your good. I mean, King David commits adultery. He arranges a murder, and in the end he says, against you and you only have I sinned. And you're like, really? Not to minimize the human damage, but to locate the deepest offense. Where's the offense? It's that it blinds you. It keeps you longer than you want to stay. It costs you more than you want to pay every single time. And it may even make you feel dirty until you do it and again and again and again. And then it just feels normal. Like we tend to treat sin as something that hurts me. It leaves me empty. Maybe you've had the gospel shared with you that way. Why do you feel so empty? It damages my relationships. It complicates my life, but that's incomplete at best. This is what makes Kohelet's test for wisdom far off, deep, very deep, he says. That is the instrument to understand the world. Your heart, however smart, is not neutral. It is bent towards self-justification. It will find, I promise you, your heart will find what flatters it or excuses it faster than it finds the truth. I mean, when's the last time you were wrong in an argument? Did it naturally occur to you in the middle of the argument that, oh, you're so smart, wife. You're so smart, husband. Boy, you said it just perfectly. I've been wrong all the time. Kids in the room, have your parents ever said something to you and you're like, oh, amazing, you're so right about that? You would rather excuse and defend yourself Man, we are on phone duty today. It's okay. Everyone look. Only a fool knows everything. Kohelet is a wise man with resources and free time who took up a search. And if wisdom is too deep for him, then we should honestly ask, are we more likely to scapegoat than the truth unless something outside of our search fixes our heart? So it's too deep to find. Now it's too deep to control. This is chapter 8, obey the king. So wisdom literature like Proverbs exists to help people kind of get along in the world. That's its job. How do you handle money? How do you speak? How do you avoid the fool's path but that you're on, and how you avoid the fool's path? And then here in chapter 8, Kohelet does the same thing a wisdom teacher is supposed to do, but he's also confused. But first he gives court advice. Here it is, verse 2. Obey the king's command. Don't be in a hurry to leave the king's presence. Don't stand up for a bad cause, on and on. He's giving advice. Whoever obeys his command will come to no harm, and the wise heart will know the proper time and procedure. That's verse 2 through 5. So I'll give you the Darren Carlson Living Translation of that. Don't be reckless around power. Read the room. Know when to speak. Know when to keep your head down. I mean, that's competent. That's practical wisdom. That's the kind that, I mean, you've seen the movies, right? Where how do you approach a king? Well, you walk in, you bow 3 times, you got to walk backwards, you got to come out, and if you don't do it, he's going to kill you. Disrespect. This is the kind of wisdom that keeps people alive. It's the kind that keeps you alive in a corporate office as well in human history. So it sounds like, Kohelet, you did it. Wisdom works. Follow the advice. But Kohelet can't keep himself out of trouble. Verse 5 and verse 6, he does something that he's done throughout the book. He follows his advice down to the logical end, and he watches it falls apart in his hand. He's like, here's my advice. Now watch why it's terrible. For there is a proper time and procedure, verse 6. There's a proper time and procedure, a proper time, though a person may be weighed down with what? Misery. Wait a second. There's a proper time for everything, so why are you weighed down? Because, verse 7, since no one knows the future, who can tell someone else what is to come? So here's the crux of Kohelet. He's just told you a wise person knows the proper time, and then in verse 7 he says, the proper time is not knowable. Okay. So a wise person can recognize, in hindsight, I think, that there was a moment to speak and a moment to be silent, but you can't reliably know when you're standing in the moment, when the consequences are not clear and about to hit you. You know what this is, right? Like you've sat in a meeting and you've sensed very vaguely, this is an important decision, something that matters, and you still got it wrong. You took the job or you didn't. You moved or you didn't. You said a hard thing or you didn't. You bought the house like me in 2006, and you thought in 2008 that was a mistake. You played it safe, and only later, sometimes years later, you're like, I should have bought Ford at 7 cents. I should have bought Apple when it came out. I should have bought a house in 2009. I should have made this decision at work. I should have done this. Wisdom only tells you what timing exists. It doesn't say when. And he's not finished. Look at verse 8. He's like, and let me double down on you. 4 things that are denials of human control. You do not have power over the wind. So he's going to deny that you have any power over anything. You don't get to negotiate with the weather. You can't bargain with a system that is bigger than you. Like, no one has ever had power over death. That's the second one. Like, you can eat well, you can exercise, wear your seatbelt, do everything right, and then the appointment comes and you're dying. You didn't schedule that. No one is discharged in a time of war. That is, you don't get to say, you know what, I'm really tired of this conflict. I think I'll just tap out. Once you're in it, the conflict, there's no early exit just because you've had enough. And the wickedness will not deliver those who are given to it. Like, sin doesn't keep its promises. Yeah, no joke. So the very thing that you go to, control, manipulating outcomes, securing others for your own advantage, it doesn't actually rescue you in the end. So wind, death, war, wickedness. Kohelet picks 4 because they cover the whole territory of your life: nature, mortality, conflict, morality. And he says, none of those bend to you, not any of them. I mean, we are a control-obsessed culture, wouldn't you think? If we can just attend or learn how to maximize our time, our life will be better. We track our sleep, we optimize our calendars, we have an app that tells us our heart rate variability and stress levels, and your whole life is dictated by, what did that thing say about my stress levels? Now I'm stressed. I mean, one of the most popular books right now, it has been for the last, maybe I don't know how long it's been out, is Atomic Habits. Maybe you've read it. People believe you have enough systems, you have enough routines, you have enough tractors, you optimize your day to eliminate uncertainty. But no habit tracker stops cancer or betrayal or recession or death. I mean, they're helpful, but they're not sovereignty. You think, if I just get wise enough, disciplined enough, informed enough, I can manage my way out of uncertainty, and you can't. The king has power over you, Kohelet says. You don't always know how to navigate him safely. The future has power over you. You can't see far enough into it with certainty. And even death is on its own schedule that is not asking your permission. You are on your very best day, operating with a wisdom that knows there's a right time and a wrong move, and you can't reliably do that every single time. That's the ceiling of human wisdom. So it's too deep to find. It's too deep to control. And wall 3, it's too deep to explain. So Kohelet has spent these movements establishing limits, the limit of his own search, the limit of his own control, and now he turns to the limit that hurts, right? The limit of justice. Verse 10 is, a funeral scene of sorts. He watches the wicked buried with honor. So they're given a state funeral, eulogized in the city they destroy. That's verse 10. Those who had done right are forgotten. That's verse 10. And so the wicked get a parade, the righteous get forgotten. That's not a minor irritation for Kohelet. That's the kind of thing that makes him question whether the universe is paying attention to him. This, if you've seen the movie, not that I recommend it, No Country for Old Men. The villain walks off with I'm ruining it for you. I don't care. The villain walks off with the money. The man trying to do the right thing is dead. The sheriff who spent the film trying to make sense of it all admits he's outmatched. There's no justice. There's no bow on it. Exactly where Kohelet is standing in verse 10. And then verse 11. When the sentence for the crime is not carried out quickly, people's hearts are filled with schemes to do wrong. There's the scheming again. So when punishment, this is Kohelet's view, when punishment is slow and invisible, it doesn't just deter evil, it actually emboldens evil. So when someone does something wrong with no consequences, maybe you've experienced this with somebody, they don't go, oh, I'm so grateful I didn't get punished. They don't say, wow, I did something serious and they were so kind. Instead, it gives them an opportunity to do it again. This could be as simple as with a child, of course. You show them mercy and it gives them more opportunity to do the same thing. Let's not put this on other people. How about you? Like, you didn't get caught. You just keep going. Kohelet is naming something that is true, I think, that when sin doesn't get confronted, it just grows in the space you give it, right? If you give it the closet, it's going to take over your closet. It's like mold. If you give them the bedroom, it's going to grow in the bedroom. You're going to give it the house, it's going to grow in the house. Sin will always grow in the space that you give it to grow. It always takes you further than you want to go. Now, verse 12 is genuinely strange. Isn't this whole book strange? Kohelet says, a wicked person who commits 100 crimes may live a long time. That's an observation. It's his data point. That's verse 10, the funeral scene, right? Like wickedness, unpunished, persisting. And then he contradicts himself. Yet I know it will go better for those who fear God, who are reverent before him. And then verse 13, it doubles down again. Because the wicked who do not fear God, it will not go well with them. Okay, Kohelet, which is it? 2 verses before, the wicked are thriving, and now they're not. Here's how I would interpret this, and I know enough Hebrew to be dangerous, not enough to be a scholar. Everywhere else in this book, okay, Kohelet uses a particular verb form, the kind that is used for things like, I tested this, I observed this, I found this. But in verse 12, he doesn't use that verb form. He uses the verb form that says something like, let me recite the official answer for you. Not because my eyes see it, but because my eyes actually don't see it. In other words, he appears to be quoting. It's like, he sees a gap. He says, I saw this happen, the wicked are flourishing, and then I'm going to give you the Sunday school answer. It will go well for them if they fear God. It's like when I taught high school Bible, like the bazillion years ago, and when they didn't know the answer on the test, do you know what they would write every single time? Jesus. Jesus. Sunday school answer. Everything else around this passage indicates that Kohelet sees one thing and has the Sunday school answer on the other thing. And verse 14 confirms it. He goes right back to his own testimony. The righteous get what the wicked deserve. The wicked get what the righteous deserve. And then his favorite line, this is Hevel. Meaningless. He's a man caught between what he is supposed to believe and what his eyes see. And he holds up both, and he calls the gap vapor, something you can't get your hands on. And if you've personally struggled with questions about Christian faith or just religion in general, or know someone who does, the way Kohelet must resonate, right? Like, I was taught one thing, but my eyes see something else. How can I therefore believe what I've been taught when I see this? You ever been with a grieving family and thought, this isn't supposed to happen to people like them? You ever watched a manipulative person rise and a faithful person gets pushed aside? You know this gap, right? Like, you've probably stood in the gap. And Kohelet, who's honest, he doesn't lie about it. He won't tell you, evil is always punished, because he hasn't seen that. And he won't let you go on the conviction that you should see this all the time. And then he does what he always does when the weight gets too heavy. Okay, verse 15. So I commend the enjoyment of life, because there is nothing better for a person under the sun than to eat, drink, and be glad. Okay, here it is again. Carpe diem, seize the day. And you've seen this back in chapter 4, verse 2. Faced with oppression, no comforter. He says the dead are better off living. Therefore, numb it. It sounds like resolution, right? Like, eat, drink, be merry, for tomorrow we die. But notice Kohelet has just spent, think context here. He has just spent 5 verses saying justice is absent, the wicked thrive, the righteous are forgotten, and it splits him in half. And then his response is, you know what? You'll have joy that will accompany your toil if you just do these things for pleasure. This is, in my view, pleasure dressed up as living. Haven't you done that? You put the word blessed in front of a sentence when you're having a hard time. You numb yourself. You seek the basic pleasures just to get through life because it's so hard. What do we call it? Self-care. Just treat yourself. You just need to unwind. That's life under the sun. That third glass of wine, the endless scroll, the home renovation project just keeps you just busy enough, just comfortable enough, just distracted enough to not have to sit with the unanswered question Kohelet's trying to sit with. I've said this quote many times, Blaise Pascal, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit in a room alone. What is that? It's that silence forces you to think, and we don't like to think. Therefore, go eat, go drink, go be merry. Don't think about this. Like, we reach for pleasure, not because you found peace, but because you need noise in your life. And that's where Kohelet is more honest, I think, than most of us who reach for pleasure. He tells you it doesn't actually work. In chapter 2, verse 2, he says what? Laughter, I said, is madness. What's the use of pleasure? Which is why, in the second half of verse 15, he doesn't say everyone gets this gift. He says God gives it to some people, not necessarily to him. There are people who can eat bread and drink and their wine and let the weight of the world recede for them in the evening, and he is surrounded by a world that offers that to him, and he stands outside the door. He doesn't experience it because life is too deep to find. It's too deep to control. It's too deep to explain, and the last wall, it's too deep to trace. So he closes the chapter here with what I read earlier, not with resolution, but with defeat. He's defeated. He applies his mind to know wisdom, to observe the labor under earth, people getting no sleep day and night. And then verse 17, the verdict. No one can comprehend. Okay. What goes on under the sun? Despite all their efforts to search it out, no one can discover its meaning. Even if the wise claim to know, they cannot really comprehend it. Notice who he's talking about. He's talking about the people who are equipped to understand it, the wise. Even the wise can't comprehend what God is doing in the world. So he circles back to the same idea he started with. No one comprehends, no one discovers, no one can really comprehend. You know, if you say that 3 times in like 2 verses, you probably he wants you to hear it. This is back to chapter 7, verse 23. This wisdom is far off and most profound. Who can discover it? His answer is no one. Like he's saying his view is God is real. He thinks constant, ongoing. I saw everything God has done, and it's utterly inaccessible to him. You know, that's harder to sit with than an atheist. Like an atheist, at least you have the comfort of consistency. There's nothing there, so I can't find it. It's fine. But Kohelet's problem is worse. There is something there, and I can't find it. You know, I read an Old Testament scholar this week who said Kohelet looks at history, and it doesn't explain itself. He looks at nature, and it doesn't explain itself. He goes to the temple and the rituals and the place where heaven and earth are supposed to connect, and there's silence. Like every channel in the world to hear from God to Kohelet is on mute. And this is what I think is the truest thing about Ecclesiastes. Like the limits of unaided wisdom is you can apply your heart, you can lose sleep, you could be the wisest person in the room, and the work of God can be too deep for you. Not because it isn't real, but because you don't have the equipment to actually hear it. You know, Tolkien, Lord of the Rings author, said that while we're inside a story, we can't actually see a whole story. Yeah, I'll give you 2 examples from life. I have a close acquaintance. I'll just call her Dorothy. She experienced, as a mom, a miraculous healing. She had been bedridden in her life, in her home for a year on a farm. The hospital had sent her home to die when she went to the doctor. Mayo Clinic sent her the death certificate, fully expecting her to die in days. And then these 2 charismatics from California came to her house, visited her, prayed with her, and declared, "Dorothy, get out of bed and walk." And she did. I know everyone involved in this story. I know this is true. She went in to live in her 90s. 2 of Dorothy's sons witnessed this event. One, deeply impacted, his life changed, became a pastor. The other one does not remember it and is an unbeliever. When asked by a friend about his faith recently, he just rebuffed him and said, "I took care of that a long time ago." What is that? Same event one person saw. The other is someone I knew 20 years ago, Gwen Voss. Gwen died 7 days before her wedding. A twin, I'll never forget it. Her father, Tim, and her mom, Kathy, had been with her for hours, and Gwen sat up in a hospital bed for just a normal procedure and went into cardiac arrest and died. And her previous roommate had not been doing well. someone who'd been struggling emotionally and physically, very bitter. And 2 days before she died, an older woman from across the hall was moved into Gwen's room. She's 90 years old, gracious. And Kathy had even said to her husband, I hope I'm as beautiful as her when I'm 90. And Saturday, Gwen's heart stops. Kathy's is with Gwen and this woman, and they're rushed out of the room. The doctors are trying to save Gwen. Kathy's inconsolable. She's a nurse. She's like, she's gone. And so she can't get back to Gwen. And so the 90-year-old woman says, honey, come and sit with me. And so she took Kathy's hand. Kathy, when she told the story, said, I just felt peace come over me. Kathy says, do you know the Lord? And she said, honey, you imagine 90-year-old, honey, my grandfather was a minister. Of course I know the Lord. And then she prayed and ministered to Kathy. And then she said something to the effect of, now I know why I'm here, to be with you. I was just a little dizzy, and my children put me in the hospital. You ever done that, kids? And this is why I'm here. And then she started sharing, I actually have lost 2 children of my own, one to cardiac arrest. And she began to speak the promises of God to Kathy, all before Kathy's family could arrive. And Kathy's conclusion was, I don't even know this woman's name. Even then, I knew before that God had sent her to be with me in that difficult hour. I knew he took Gwen to be with him, but he was caring for me and my family. What do you see in that story? You see that one with clear eyes? See, for Kohelet, revelation doesn't exist. He's just trying to get through life under the sun. So where does that leave you this beautiful Sunday morning? Let's walk back through the 4 walls just quickly as he hits each one. Too deep to find. Kohelet searches for an explanation, and he finds at the bottom of his search a heart bent towards blaming instead of the truth. That's exactly the opposite of the gospel. Jesus doesn't hand you a better technique for having wisdom. He is wisdom. He's the one given to us, not discovered by some sort of relentless seeker, but revealed to anyone who will receive it. You don't have to find your way to the bottom of every answer anymore. He's already been there and come back. We're too deep to control. Wind, death, war, wickedness, none of that bends to you. It bends to him. The disciples are in the boat in the middle of the storm, and the waves obey him, and the disciples ask the only sane question anyone would ever ask, who is this? He walks into death itself, the one thing Kohelet says no one survives. You will never be in control of a storm, but you know the one who the storms obey. Too deep to explain. And this is the one that hurts the most. The wicked buried with honor, the righteous forgotten, and the gap in between from what you've been taught and what you actually see. But what's the cross in the end? It's the one place you never look. The cross. The wicked one receives the honor that he doesn't deserve, us, because the righteous one is forgotten by men and forsaken by God on purpose. Justice satisfied. And then too deep to trace. You know, every channel Kohelet tries, history, nature, the temple, comes back in silence. But the author of Hebrews says, the very beginning of the book, God has spoken in these last days to the fathers by the prophets, has spoken in last days by his Son. Paul tells us in Corinthians, for all the world, for all its wisdom, did not know God through wisdom, so God was pleased to make himself known through what wise people would have called foolish, a crucified Messiah. And so the very gap Kohelet stood in, like, what is this, gets closed by God himself, who steps into the gap. Kohelet says no one can discover it, and the gospel is not search harder, it's he found you. I thought I'd close by just reading a letter written in the 3rd century. This is a man telling his friend he's a Christian. It's a bad world, Donatus, a very bad world, but I have discovered in the midst of it a company of quiet and holy people who have learned a great secret. They have found a joy which is 1,000 times better than any pleasure of this sinful life. They are despised and persecuted, but they care not. They are masters of their souls. They have overcome the world. These people, Donatus, are Christians, and I am one of them. Let's pray. Father, if anyone here feels the tension of Kohelet, may they find Christ and be relieved of all these tensions. If their eyes are just on the life of this world and life under the sun, may they get their eyes up vertical onto the one who sent his Son. I just pray for anyone here who's just on the struggle bus, for whatever reason, that they might find healing and they may not hit the walls that Kohelet kept hitting. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's stand and sing.